This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth, for competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty, for the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meatpackers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
All right.
Welcome to this week's...
Hey! Okay, welcome to Behind.
There you go.
Welcome
to Larry Klayman's show. No, I'm just kidding.
So,
Right.
I am honored to have Larry. Both of us are honored to have Larry
absolutely.
Klayman on. You know, when I was transitioning to become a Republican, not knowing at the time in the '90s and stuff, I used to watch him on TV.
Careful with that language.
Yes,
Careful with that transition language.
Yes. And
You're gonna get
like I
those
remember watching him on TV.
activists after you.
So those are your follow. I'm 63. I'm an old guy, right? But like I never was involved in politics, and then in the '90s, I was raised Democrat, Union family, and I'm like, I start seeing Larry on TV. You know, he's one of the influences, right? And I saw the Clintons and all this crazy stuff, and I started like, okay, these guys are really nuts. Not that the Republicans are the best, but I'm like, these Democrats are crazy. And some of the stuff that he started doing and I was watching got my attention. He's one of the people that got my attention. And Larry, you know, he'll do his own little bio, but he started Judicial Watch, huge influence. And now he's in there trying to help fight against these crazy judges in the lawfare battle that's going on right now. So he's going to talk about that. So I just want to say I'm honored that he's here. He started Freedom Watch. He's going to talk about that. He's not with Judicial Watch anymore, but he started Freedom Watch. He will talk about it. And Paul, why don't you do a little kick in and we'll have Larry jump in here.
Yeah, this is an interesting guest to have on right now, especially with all the stuff that's going on with the flights with the Venezuelans. And did you see that one where they played the closing time video?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
So
that's scaring the hell out of those Venezuelans.
Yeah. Well, this is what I'm railing against running for village councils. The government is getting too, they're getting too much of an overreach mentality, and I think that's what's going on with the judges. They're trying to tell the executive branch what they can and can't do, and I think we're we're fighting the same battle we fought before Trump got elected. So with that, Larry, good to have you. Thanks for coming on. You want to give us kind of your elevator pitch?
Pleasure.
And tell us a little bit more. I heard some interesting things in your bio there, but tell us a little bit more about it.
You get a kick out of that.
Yeah.
That was a radio show that I used to do on Radio America, and I still do podcasts and that kind of thing. I haven't used that lead in for a while. It was done by a very creative person named Franklin Raff. But just a little bio on who I am, and you can find it at freedomwatchusa.org. I am a lawyer of many decades. Hopefully I don't look that old. And of course, back in 1994, when I found Judicial Watch, Clinton was in power. And during that time period, I became so well known because I drew some good judges in those days who allowed me to get into the Clinton administration and regime, whatever you want to call it. And I took many depositions of people in the White House, the Commerce Department, and throughout. And even little Georgie Stephanopoulos, who wound up getting sanctioned for lying at the time.
Yeah.
White House counsel. And lo and behold, later on, the NBC drama West Wing created a character after me called Harry Claypool of Freedom Watch, Larry Klayman Judicial Watch. And that's what, when I ran for the U.S. Senate in Florida, I didn't win. I came out, and probably it's good I didn't win because I'm better from the outside. I would hate to be there sitting with 100 senators. He didn't have much say in much of anything. But to make a long story short, I created this group called Freedom Watch, which does today what I used to do at Freedom Watch. We bring hard-hitting cases. I'm a trial lawyer, not just Freedom of Information Act cases, but real lawsuits. And, it's just one example. We have a case in Dallas, Texas, where we sued the Wuhan lab and the Chinese government over COVID. And currently there's a motion for default pending. It's a class action. It could give rise to a lot of damage. We have cases against Joe Biden for defrauding the American people in the 2020 elections. We included Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's lovely wife, Jill, in that one. I brought it as a Florida voter and citizen. We've got citizens' grand juries that we hold because in 1992, Justice Scalia wrote an opinion, United States versus Williams, that said the grand jury belongs to the American people, not the three branches of government. So
Right.
I commissioned a grand jury. We indicted Biden for bribery in communist China, Ukraine, and Russia, and also Fauci. Biden got 20 years, Fauci got life. So these are and we have a right of citizen's arrest, although we're not physical, we're peaceful and legal, but the American people have a right to enforce their justice system themselves. So that's what we do at Freedom Watch. So thank you for asking. But really, my deepest, I would say, expertise is on the judiciary, because I've been up against them now for 48 years, almost half a century, believe it or not. And Thomas Jefferson said he was against federal judges. He wrote to his colleagues in the United States, the Continental Congress, and then the people that drafted, the framers that drafted the Constitution. He said, I am against federal judges. They would become despots and tyrants, causing us to shed the blood of patriots and tyrants yet again every 20 years or so. What's a few thousand dead to refresh the tree of liberty? It's a national manure government. He didn't want to see anybody hurt or dead, and neither do I. But he realized that unelected, unaccountable to the people, that they would take power away, particularly from the executive branch and even the legislative branch, and they would do so in a dishonest way. Right. So he was against it, and it's, lo and behold, it has come to pass. I firmly believe that if Thomas Jefferson were alive on January 6th, he would have been the first into the Capitol.
He was against federal judges, not so the Supreme Court is different, right? Obviously, the Supreme Court is the judicial branch, but you're talking about federal judges, like districts in every state across the country who's connected to the federal government, right?
He was against the Supreme Court too.
Okay.
He was against. He wanted it to be handled by the states. He was a true republic.
Yeah, he seems like he had a good instinct for keeping people free. No, out of all the founders.
Well, what he said is that federal judges and justices would be no more honest than any other man, but they would not be accountable to the people. And lo and behold, we're seeing that in real time with President Trump today.
Well, and do you think that they, do you think that it's just too broad of a jurisdiction, and federal is too broad of a jurisdiction for judges? Is that kind of what the thrust of Jefferson's opinion was?
One of them. One of the creative ways that we can cut back their power, and we can talk about that more in context, is to take jurisdiction away in certain areas. For instance, there was a judge yesterday, a lesbian judge, who made a ruling that Trump could no longer be commander-in-chief and issue a ruling that you can't have transgenders in combat. Now, she has no jurisdiction to do that. So Congress can make it clear that you don't have jurisdiction. In state courts and federal courts, there are courts with specific jurisdiction. A bankruptcy court, for instance, handles bankruptcy. In state courts, for instance, you'll have a small claims court. You'll have in Florida, where I practice a lot, you'll have, a circuit court, which is for claims over $30,000, and a county court for claims that are less. These are the kinds of things that you can do to cut them back. And we can talk about that. But right now, we have a real problem. And this is not a new problem, but it's gotten worse, is that these judges think that they're God. Since they're unelected, and they believe they're there for life, they're not really there for life. They serve for good behavior. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives them life tenure. And I have a 5-part proposal on how we can reform the judiciary. And I'm forming kind of a complement to Elon Musk, Department of Government Efficiency. We are putting together some prominent people, including Alan Keyes, former ambassador to the UN under Reagan, to form a Department of Legal Accountability, DOLA. And we're going to hopefully be working, and we'll be working, with Pam Bondi at the Justice Department and others, to come up with ways that we can cut back on the power of these judges and reform our legal system. Our legal system is the most corrupt profession in the United States. And if you think the lawyers are bad, there's an expression, how do you tell lawyers lying? And I'm a lawyer, as you know. So I fight the lawyers. I'm the anti-lawyer. If they're moving their mouth. Well, the judges are even worse. Yeah, they're even worse. There's another joke. Why don't sharks attack lawyers? Professional courtesy.
Yeah.
So this is what you're dealing with. Everybody knows it. They occupy the political.
It's like if you take something to the ARDC and you do have a valid complaint, they don't do anything to those guys in Illinois. One of the weapons, if you could explain to a layman, is that when you do these cases and they go forward, isn't it strategically important when you get the opportunity to do discovery, and then that allows you to kind of go within the fingers and all the corruption? Isn't that important for you when you run these cases to go forward and then get the okay to do a discovery that allows you to find more of the corruption that's going behind whatever your case is? If you could explain.
Excellent.
Huh?
Yeah, excellent point, Terry. That's how you got to know me. Okay, you saw me on TV because I went right through the Clinton administration. I deposed nearly everybody except Bill and Hill themselves. I even got James Carville to admit in video that he had recommended to Bill Clinton to get the Privacy Act protected files in the White House of a woman he harassed, Kathleen Willey. And that's the only time a judge has made a finding that a sitting judge committed a crime. So yes, I was taking depositions and after deposition, and I had a judge that allowed me to do it, Royce Lamberth. In today's world, it's much more difficult to get to discovery, and these judges protect the powers to be. Mm-hmm. It's a different world. I formed Judicial Watch in 1994. That's 31 years ago. It is different today, and we have to use other means in addition, to court cases to bring about reform in the legal system. Now, one of the things about judges, if they do something unethical in federal court, then you can file a claim with the Judicial Council. Who sits on that Judicial Council?
Yeah,
other judges
They're
in
friends.
the same court.
They're friends. Yeah.
What makes the what makes the discovery process so difficult? Is it that judges have judgment over whether or not something can be in discovery, or what? Like, why does it seem like people can't access certain information? It seems like with some of these cases with President Trump, that's been the case.
Yeah, it's the judge's interpretation of how they want to manipulate the law and allow.
Well, it gets into how these judges are chosen. Yeah. These judges are chosen through political campaign contributions, otherwise known as, quote, legalized bribery.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
right.
How do they get on the bench?
Right.
And it's taken action against two large law firms that I've been up against frequently, two corrupt law firms in the last few weeks. Is these law firms, corporations, labor unions, they pump money into a senator or the president himself to get people on the bench. They own those judges on the bench, in effect, with a few exceptions. Mm-hmm. I mean, somehow people get through honestly every now and then.
Right.
But most of these judges are political hacks. They're politicians in robes. They know who got them there. They're not risk takers. They don't want to stick their neck out. And you asked me, I think, before the show about Coney Barrett, in the Supreme Court. They also want to be part of the club. Mm-hmm. They want to go to parties in Georgetown. They want to be accepted. John Roberts is like that as well, the Chief Justice. And I know from a former whistleblower that I represented, I won't use his name, that the National Security Agency has all their information, all their emails and all their communications. They're easily blackmailed.
Jeez.
So, and you remember Pelican Brief by John Grisham?
Yeah.
Well, Justice Scalia was killed. Okay, I don't think that was an accident.
I've heard that. I read the evidence on his death, and I was like, "What?"
That was in the 90s.
This
right?
was no. What, 7, 8 years ago? Something.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh. So they're scared. They're scared. I have a federal judge in Dallas, Texas, that I'll tell you a quick story here, and you can read about it at freedomwatchusa.org. I hope people will go and contribute with tax-deductible contributions because we need it. But I brought a case right after COVID-19, class action in Dallas, for a photo shop called Buzz Photo that was put out of business by COVID. And it took us 3 years to serve the communist Chinese, the Chi-Com, so to speak. And I had to, first we did it, with court approval with DHL and Federal Express. The communist Chinese wouldn't accept. So then we went through the State Department, through diplomatic channels, and they were eventually served. And when that happened, the Embassy of China, People's Republic of China in Washington, D.C., wrote a letter to Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State under Biden, in this two-faced
piece of shit.
criminal over there who's Trump took away a security clearance recently. He signed the letter that Hunter's laptop was Russian disinformation. But anyway, so it goes to him, threatening the United States and me if the case goes forward with retaliation. He then sends it to the corrupt Biden Attorney General Merrick Garland, who then sends it to the judge in Dallas, Texas. So for over a year, this judge has refused to enter a default, even though Communist China and the Wuhan Lab were properly served. And I think, he's playing politics. And also, I think he fears for his own safety. So this is what you're dealing with in the federal court. And they're not standing in the stead for the American people. We've seen that.
Yeah, I have a question for you that's been bugging me for a long time. So, before I got involved, I've only been involved in politics for the last 4 years because of the porn, the masking and stuff. But I never really believed in there was a deep state. I thought maybe, and I thought people that were preppers were nuts. I totally did a 180, right? It was because of Trump and everything that happened over the years. And so there's many people writing stories about the Clintons, and I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but when he was the governor, that he was aware or familiar with some of the drug transactions and the cartels going through his state and stuff. Is that all bullshit, or do you think there's some truth to that, or do you even know?
It's true. I represented nearly all the Clinton women, not with sex stuff, but because they were being threatened. And I remember when I met with Jennifer Flowers, who was my client, and she became a friend. She was very loyal. And her then husband, Finest Shellnut, is that Finest told me, and we knew this, that Clinton, had smoked cocaine with him and Webster Hubble. They were, if you might remember, Clinton was always rubbing his nose and it was pink, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, of course.
He was going into the White House movie theater with the chief of staff, Marcia Scott, who he was having a relationship with, sexual, as well as Hillary Clinton. So the joke in Washington used to be, what's the only thing that Bill and Hillary have in common? The answer, they both date the same women.
Well, of course he knew about it. It's pretty much public record. The CIA was running drugs through Mena, Arkansas airport. So you think the governor of Arkansas didn't know that the CIA was doing that? Of course he did.
No, he knew, and he was a user at a minimum.
Yeah. So I feel we'd be remiss if we didn't bring. This is apropos to this network, but General Flynn, of course, his case is a perfect example for you to talk about. I remember, I don't know if you remember the details, but I believe the federal judge when they were trying to prosecute General Flynn during the first Trump administration, prevented the government from dropping the case against him. Do you remember that case?
I do, and I believe that was Judge Reggie Walton, who was not the sharpest knife in the drawer.
But that was unprecedented, right? I mean, I never even heard of that.
Yeah, it's unprecedented, and there's a judge in New York these days who won't allow for the dismissal of the indictment with Mayor Adams there either.
Oh, right. Yeah.
They sometimes step in. They haven't decided in New York yet, but yeah, I mean, they have their partisan positions, and they think they're God. And the Justice Department decides to withdraw an indictment. That's it. It's over.
No.
So, I mean, Larry, I just got to ask you, as a layman, as a non-lawyer here, my understanding is a judge is like a referee, and is supposed to be a referee according to the rule of law.
No,
and
you're right.
The idea. So if the offensive side decides he wants to stop the game, the judge is saying, no, we're going to continue it on. What is that kind of like what he's doing here? And how do they even have that power?
Totally improper. And so when you're in court frequently, you're not up against just the other side. You have to contend with the judge.
Yeah.
And federal judges, because they are there for life, they think.
They're kings.
I have proposals to get rid of that. We can talk about it on this show or some other show.
Yeah.
That to reform how we select judges and how we police them. But the fact is that they think they're untouchable. And federal judges are frequently, I would say, rude and nasty to lawyers. You don't see that in the state court so much because they got to be elected. But you see that on the federal court. They're arrogant.
Because they're appointed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're supposedly for life. And I got another question for you about, you brought up Mayor Johnson. And, because there's some kind of cooperation, between him and the Trump administration, the DOJ and stuff. And they keep trying to say, oh, was there agreement? Was there agreement? Just like any criminal case or whatever case at the federal level, and if you're cooperating, and basically Johnson's cooperating to help them try to go after these criminals, they don't give you a deal. There's an assumed deal, right? I'm asking you a question, right? There's an assumed deal, but they don't write it down. So when Mayor Johnson says, hey, there's no deal, he's being honest. But that, it's funny that these Democrats, they know the law. They know when they catch people, they cooperate with them and they do things. And there's no promise to say, hey, we're not going to, come down with you at the full force of the legal system or prison or whatever, right? They know that happened. Isn't that kind of what's happening with Mayor Johnson? But he's not.
Eric Adams, actually.
I'm sorry, my Mayor's Johnson. Sorry,
generic name, Johnson Adams.
Yeah,
easily confused. But they probably cut a deal with him. Yeah, they probably did, and it may not have been the best thing at all, but it furthers the basic interest of the United States and of New York City. But in any event, it's not for some judge to decide. It's not for him to decide.
Or some politician to slam him when they're questioning him. Yeah. It's like they know that happens all the time with drug dealers, organized crime, right? They know that's happening. And basically this guy is getting a pass to help our country, to help make it safer. They should be glad about that happening. And no, they're not going to say, hey, we're going to give you this, this, and this. There's an assumption, right, that we're going to go lighter on you if you do what you're supposed to do to make this country safer, right?
Yeah, generally speaking, and nobody's stupid enough to talk about quid pro quo.
Right.
But this happens. It happens with informants. Okay, the FBI flips people, and it makes them informants. And
yeah. Well, hey, you know what? I want to bring up something that's big in the news right now because I had a conversation the other day, and I think people. These stories in the media, they get framed to be a certain narrative, but this Judge Bozeman situation with President Trump, I don't even want to try to describe myself. Could you describe it and just kind of tell us what's going on there and why this guy seems to be an activist and what he seems to be abusing how he seems to be abusing his power?
Let's give a little background. It's very instructive here. Tells you how both political parties have created this problem. Trump is not really a Republican.
Right.
He's a populist. He's independent.
I agree.
Now, he ran as a Republican because that's the easiest way he could win.
Thank you.
And the people up on Capitol Hill, most of them are obedient to him because they know that if decided to get primaried, that is having them defeated, that they would no longer be there. So it's not because they love Trump.
Right.
They're part of the establishment. So let's look at Judge Boasberg, appointed to the Superior Court in D.C., and that still works it's like a federal court in this regard because it's a federal enclave.
Right.
By George W. Bush, if you can believe that, appointed by George W. Bush. Then he gets nominated and confirmed 98-0 by the Senate and appointed by Obama to the federal bench, the district court. Then Chief Justice Roberts, who claims to be of Republican origin, he then puts him on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. So you see how it works with all the establishment here? Now, I've been in front of Boasberg. He's a complete political hack. He refused to release, both my former group, Judicial Watch, and Freedom Watch sought the photographs of bin Laden's body. A terrorist.
Yeah.
Why didn't he release it? Because he was protecting God knows what interest. Okay,
Yeah,
at
right.
the time. He
Pretty
claims he
strange.
didn't want to start an international incident, but that was not for him to do. There was no privacy right. The law said they had to be released. We
Yeah.
don't even know to this day if Obama killed bin Laden or if he died of
Well,
natural
there's
cause.
absolutely no evidence. Like, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but there's
No.
zero evidence for the actual public to know that he's dead.
Yeah, and why would this guy, what was his name, O'Neill, the SEAL?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why would he go around bragging about it? I mean, he put a target on his back by doing that. And it sounded credible to me, frankly. But that being said, this is the same judge also who let Kevin Kleinsmith off the hook with no jail time, pled guilty to a felony of falsifying an FBI affidavit, which contributed greatly to Robert Mueller's Russian witch hunt. Let him off.
It should be treason, right? I mean, he interfered in the presidential election technically with a foreign adversary, right? Or with foreign adversary collected information, or not adversary, but a foreign government, right? With the Michael Steele. Either way,
dossier.
The dossier.
Yeah.
So he should have at the very least gone to prison, right?
Yeah, and he should have been disbarred, okay? But the DC bar, the disciplinary apparatus, is run by an individual, a vile human being, I might add. I've been suing them for years, named Hamilton Fox and his assistant, Julia Porter. And there's not one person on the DC bar who ever gave a penny to a Republican or the court, and they all gave to people I sued, like Obama, Clinton, and others.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it just so happens that Kevin Kleinsmith also got off with the DC bar. This is District of Columbia, and this is the environment in the District of Columbia. It is corrupt top to bottom. It's worse than a swamp. It's a cesspool.
So, Larry, let me just understand this. The FBI lawyer who lied in order to continue the FISA warrant process that had the FBI illegally spying on President Trump not only didn't get held accountable by the law, but didn't even get disbarred.
That's right. It's all part of the weaponization.
That is insane.
The total leftist control of the District of Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
President Trump's talk about moving the FBI out of DC.
Yeah.
You got to move the capital out of DC.
Yeah, that's it. I think
Put
that's
it
a great
west or
idea.
put it in the South.
Yeah, I got a question for you, and you'll remember this because I had the worst memory. The 1980s and 90s was rough on my brain and all this stuff. But I remember
you were
Trump. He had a case before a Hispanic judge that was part of La Raza. Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember.
I do.
I don't remember what the case was. And then Trump said that he was concerned that the guy wouldn't be fair, and because of his tie. And so let me finish this, and you can answer. And I find it ironic that they were slamming him, right? The left and right. Oh, how could you criticize a judge? These judges are like God, right? They don't have biases. And then I remember Ruth Ginsburg attacking Trump shortly after that from the Supreme Court that she had to do an apology. What was that case again that Trump had concerns? Because we're talking about these corrupt judges, right? Or how they have bias.
It was an immigration case, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
I had a judge in the Southern District of Texas because I brought a case for a Texas Ranger who was shot across the border in his private parts, and trying to arrest members of the drug cartel. He was shot by the Mexican military, and I had a judge who I think also had ties to La Raza, or at least was sympathetic, dismissed that case. So, La Raza is borderline, terrorist organization, essentially.
Yeah. And you agree with what Trump said, right? When they were attacking him from mostly the left and some of the right, saying that these judges are so independent. That was a lie.
None of them are independent.
Yeah.
When you go into court, when I go into court, based on who appointed that judge, whether it was a Democrat or Republican appointee, or what president, you can gauge with almost exact certainty how they're going to rule. And you could make the same argument the same day to two different judges who came from different political backgrounds and get two different decisions. And you see it on the Supreme Court. How does the Supreme Court have any real degree of integrity when you can guess how it breaks down You know,
Yeah, right. That's a
party.
great point.
You
That's a
know,
great
now we have
point.
two defections lately, sometimes three with Kavanaugh. He's kind of, wishy-washy too.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
got
he
worked
is.
over with alleged allegations of sexual harassment and abuse. So the guy's reflexive.
Yeah.
The worst one up there, in my opinion, is the Chief Justice.
Yeah, he is.
Totally,
He's a piece of shit,
totally,
man. Sorry.
totally insincere,
Hmm.
two-faced. And he even wrote in an annual report a few years ago when there was an issue of conflicts of interest of two judges, one Republican and one Democrat, that they don't have to abide by the code of professional responsibility on the Supreme Court.
Mhm.
It doesn't apply to them. Ethics don't apply to them, and it's probably unconstitutional. And here's a guy who just yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, slammed President Trump when he called for the impeachment of Boasberg.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
What did you think of that?
Yeah.
well, the Chief Justice had no business
He should have
wading
kept his
into.
mouth shut.
Now, let me ask you something about this because I've heard the argument that the impeachment of a judge, the legislative branch has no authority to do that. But I mean, well, can you just explain the impeachment process of a judge?
That is the responsibility.
That's what I
And
thought.
again, you can read about this by going to freedomwatchusa.org and get my book. It takes the counter revolution, Wake Up America. Is that it's the House Judiciary Committee which oversees federal judges. Now, while you see Jim Jordan on TV all the time on Fox News, no coat, rolled up sleeves.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
They, Mr. Tough Guy, he's never called one judge in front of his committee for 8 years.
Jeez.
Not one.
Have you
Why?
have you personally reached out to him or anybody and called
I
him
have.
out?
He ignores it. And we need to put pressure on him. He needs to know that he's got to do his job.
So tell me why do you think, because I love the guy, right? And why is he not doing that? What's driving him to not get back to you, to not do something like that, which would be beneficial to us? What's behind that?
I walked into his office a couple of years ago and hung around. But what was driving him? What's driving him is the Washington establishment. Right. And also I think a fear that someday he and others like him could be in front of a judge and they might retaliate against him because he's actually sought to do his job with other fellow federal judges. These judges hang together. You go against one of them, and
Man, they
even
seem
the
dangerous.
opposite party will react. They're all part of a club. They don't want to be touched.
Yeah, I don't know if this is you, Paul, or I know we had these conversations before. We have some Republican friends, senior, and we call them rhinos in establishment, and like there's some that are like embedded and corrupt with respect to the uniparty, right, Larry? But then there's also some that are not. They have the ill intent, but they grew up in the ranks in the Illinois GOP as part of the establishment, and they become friends with these people. They might not be corrupted by money, but they become personal friends. Therefore, they don't really go after them as much as they should. Do you agree with that, or am I wrong on that?
I do, and the FBI doesn't. Even when the FBI was semi-honest, doesn't go against judges. Yeah. We've only impeached 8 judges in our entire history, about one every 33 years. Mm-hmm. And those judges were impeached for drunkenness and not showing up to work primarily. The last judge that was impeached for bribery was Alice E. Hastings from Miami, from my home state of Florida. And he then ran for Congress claiming he was impeached because he was black and stayed in Congress for decades, recently died in the last few years.
Wow.
It's right out of a Woody Allen movie.
So this seems like a bigger problem than anybody's really paying attention to. They're not held accountable by anybody.
No, it's true. See, most lawyers won't talk the way I'm talking. They fear retaliation. Certainly I've been retaliated against. Mm-hmm. I've been retaliated by them, by the DC bar and others who I've been fighting. I'm not the only one. Anyone who supports Trump in today's world, I was ahead of my time. People said to me, Larry, I'm surprised it took this long for them to get to you. But anybody who supports Trump now is a target, weaponized target. And there's a good article that came out today by Paul Sperry in Real Clear Politics about the DC bar. You can read that, and how Hunter Biden's going to be let off with little to no discipline after he was convicted of 2 felonies. So, this is nobody will talk like I talk.
Yeah. I have a question for you, about your quest, right, to kind of fix these
yeah,
crazy judges and stuff, right? Which that's an honorable thing, and I hope you go forward with it. But from a realistic perspective and how corrupted the system is, and how you're out there doing this by yourself, do you really think you have a chance? And I'm not saying that to like tell you not to, like I fight to the very end, right? Like, do you really think you have a chance? Are you going to get the support from others that have power, money, and influence to help you go against this? And obviously, you must if you're going to continue to fight. But just share what are your thoughts on it?
I believe so. I mean, I have had an impact, but what is also, buttressed my actions is the fact that people saw what happened with President Trump leading up to the election. They
Yes.
saw the lawfare.
That's
They
a big one.
see what the DC bar did with Rudy Giuliani, who maybe made a few minor mistakes and complaints, and they just bar him. And the bar counsel Hamilton Fox tries the case himself, even though he's in his 70s. That's how much he hates Republican and conservative activist lawyers. And people now have seen what the game is, and they're seeing it again now in real time.
Mhm.
Presidents, signed hundreds of executive orders at this point, one a day or more.
They're fighting them, yeah.
And nearly all of them have been enjoined, blocked. So we're reaching a situation, and here's what's scary, is that if we can't resolve disputes in court,
Right.
the only alternative
In the
is
streets.
bloody revolution in the streets.
Yeah.
And conservatives have never been the ones to start it, and I don't advocate it at all. But when you see what's happening, to Tesla dealerships, and they're threatening
That's
So
crazy.
you know what? That was
That's
going to be my
crazy.
next question, Blair. I was labeled a domestic terrorist, right? I was put on a terrorist watch list. My family, my children, my wife. We're going to Charlie Kirk's. My kids were VIP guests at Kirk's. That's when I found out I was, quote, a domestic terrorist. Thank God that Matt Gaetz and Troy Niels got involved and eventually got me off the terrorist watch list. But so it was. I peacefully attended January 6th. I was a very vocal school board parent right after Garland put out that letter, right? It was 2 months afterwards, and we had multiple law enforcement riot gear from the police officers and FBI there. I didn't do anything wrong. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, after Southern Poverty Law Center, there's a writer that writes for the Southern Poverty Law Center named Jeff Tischler, and he's an Antifa associate in Chicago, wrote this hit piece on me. Then all of his friends started posting and said, I tried to overthrow the government. I was there with a police officer's friend. I didn't do anything wrong. And they started tagging the FBI in Chicago. And the next thing, this organization that's a Antifa organization called Sedition Hunters put a big spread on me, said I tried to overthrow the government. So within not even 2 weeks after that, I was labeled a domestic terrorist. What are your thoughts on the Southern Poverty Law Center and their collaboration with the SPLC and the SPLC's connection to Antifa, using to what you just said about fighting in the streets and stuff, which we don't hope. They are using that to intimidate people. They are using that. They're funding them through Indivisible. They're going to all in our neighborhood. They're going to the Tesla dealerships, right?
Yeah, in our neighborhood.
And then, with respect to the Proud Boys, right? I'm called a Proud Boy wannabe, a Proud Boy associate, because they show up at our events and stuff. So they label the Proud Boys as these racist homophobes, as being led by an African American guy that don't go out and fight unless they get attacked, like in our events here. We go to the events all over the place. I have my 85-year-old dad with me. The Antifa guys show up and they throw shit at us and stuff. So what are your thoughts? Southern Poverty Law Center, their connections to Antifa, and how they're weaponizing that to intimidate people from our side by not participating.
That they were working with, and I think had a contract with the FBI, during Biden and during Obama. They've written articles about me. They put us all in a hate list. The one about me calls me pathologically litigious. Of course, I have to laugh because some people hired me for that. They said, we read the article. We like that, Larry.
Isn't that a compliment?
Pathologically litigious. But they are a really evil bunch of people. They're primarily atheist. They hate anybody that believes in God. And there's another one for the American Way that is kind of like it as well. I don't know if they're still in existence anymore, but that's what you're up against.
Mm-hmm.
And these people get you implicated in things. Fortunately, I guess you weren't criminally charged, but I've had clients that did nothing. One that just put his foot in the Capitol. That was it. He just wanted to see what was going on. wound up getting indicted. And you can see the result, because the FBI spent its time, and so did the Justice Department, investigating that, while all these terrorists like Trende Arabo came to
Right.
the United States. You know, so this is what's wrong about it. And I hope, you know, in my book, it takes a counter-revolution. I know I'm pumping it here because I want people to read.
Pump away, man.
Don't just read it, but then join.
Is it on Audible?
I don't think that one is.
I have ADD, so I'm like, sorry, I can't like read it, but I'll listen to it. Paul can read it to me.
Before that is on Audible. That was called "It Takes a Revolution," but you know, when you read what happened, I go through the history of all the lies and deceit and crimes committed by our own government, and of course now we see. You know, we know Kennedy. I mean, it's probably almost 100% certain that John F. Kennedy was killed by the CIA. You know, that was.
Do you think the Chicago mob was involved too, or no?
Yeah, I mean, that was Jack Ruby. You know, and that, and you know, then there were, you know, Kennedy apparently was having an affair with Julie Exner or whatever her name was. I remember a mafia don boss. So there was a lot of basic motives, but all these people were tied in together, and. You know, there are many instances, and I go through that with the book, and why it takes a counter-revolution, is that we have tried to wage it peacefully in the courts. But if we can't wage it peacefully in the courts, then it's going to spill out. And January 6th was not an insurrection, but it was a warning.
I was there. It was not. Yeah.
It was a warning that it could be a lot worse. And I don't believe that the people rose up then just because of what happened with Trump in the election, but they saw decades of corruption. And today they see it even more. Thank God we have President Trump. He's trying to do something about it. I want to work with him. We're trying to work with him. He needs help. He can't do it alone. We, the people, have to be with him. So I hope people will go to freedomwatchusa.org and join our Justice League, because you need people out there. We Americans can't just say, okay, we elected President Trump and we don't have to do anything. Because, you know, So, probably it's not the last time. God forbid. I pray it doesn't happen. It's not the last time someone's going to take an attempt on his life. Believe me.
Yeah,
right.
Well, hopefully not. Hopefully he makes it out alive.
Hopefully, with God's protection.
Yeah. So you sound like a Jeffersonian from the beginning, and I empathize with that feeling. He was. Even amongst the founders, he seemed to be a rebel amongst them. I mean, wrote the Declaration of Independence. Seems like he was a rugged libertarian. And you had mentioned that he didn't like the idea of a federal judiciary. I believe he was also against the idea of a federal bank or any national bank of any nature.
Compromised on that later to his chagrin.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I know Hamilton advocated for it, but. You know, it seems to me, after talking to a lot of people like yourself across the political spectrum, that the foundation the founders gave us was the best that's ever been constructed in terms of government. But it seems to me like we're at a point where we need many more checks and balances.
I've always said, you see the hat that I'm wearing, the Third Continental Congress?
Yeah.
I put that on a few years ago in Philadelphia at Independence Hall. You can see it on our website at freedomwatchusa.org.
Hey, we have your website up there on the.
Yeah, you got it. I know I'm pumping
yes,
it.
Sir. But keep doing it. But I don't. I listen. No, I didn't mean it like that. I just want you to know we have it up there and go ahead, keep doing.
I want people to watch this.
Yes,
we had really prominent conservatives, people of faith, and others there. And, you know, our founding fathers were enlightened by God, but they weren't God. And they made a few mistakes. And we can correct that easily. And we can reenact a new Declaration of Independence. And we can make some tweaks to the Constitution. For instance, there's nothing in the Constitution that gives immunity to federal judges or government officials. We need to make that clear.
Right.
It can be taken away. They gave it to themselves.
They're not God. Right.
Right. And we need to maybe have a system where judges serve only for 2 terms, the term limits, renewable for good behavior.
Right.
And that can easily be clarified with legislation, that they're not there for life. We need to get them out of there if they're no good.
Yeah.
Can we not do something? Larry, can we not do something as well, checks and balance wise, to prevent the corporate, the financial capture of our government officials, not only our bureaucratic officials, but our politicians? I mean, term limits, cutting the cord between that financial system and politics and government. What can we do there?
I have another proposal. You know what insider trading is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You get inside information illegally about shares of stock. You buy stock.
Yeah.
It's what Nancy Pelosi has done, and Chuck Schumer, and all of them up there, Democrat and Republican. They come in, modestly. They go out with
Millions.
Billionaires. Okay. Because they know what companies the stock's going to rise based upon legislation and that kind of thing. Well, I have a proposal, and it'd be enforced like you would insider trading. Is that if you want to contribute to a political candidate, you contribute to a campaign finance bank that then redistributes it to the political candidate, but he does not know where it's coming from.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's a good idea.
So, and if it is disclosed,
but they still could tell them right behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, human nature. Yeah. But you try to limit it as much as possible, and you have very stiff,
But hang on a second. There's technology right now that could anonymize it completely in the general ledger type of, technology that Bitcoin is run on. It can be. We have AI and the crypto technology that can completely anonymize things. So I think you're on the right track.
Yeah, but you could verbalize.
Yeah, but you can still tell what
wallet
came from from.
Yeah.
And that's why we're putting together, a press release will come out in the next day or so, a Department of Legal Accountability with very learned people that are independent, that aren't tied to the establishment of either political party, who are conservative, who are people of faith, who, believe, like Jefferson, that the individual is what matters, above and beyond the state. And we need to get together, and we need, like we discussed at the Third Continental Congress, we need to make some fine tuning to our Constitution and enact some legislation to correct what's going on. And look at what's going on now with the federal judges. We need to make it clear, we talked about this before the show, that their decisions would only relate to the circuit in which they sit, not the entire country.
Yeah, the whole country.
We need a mechanism to hold federal judges accountable under the rules of ethics, professional ethics. We need clean bar associations that haven't been taken over by the left or any group. And there are ways that can be done as well. And the fact is that President Trump's doing tremendous things. We support him right across the board, but he cannot do it alone. And we just can't rock back, put our feet up on the coffee table, and drink wine and eat popcorn or whatever, and say, okay, you can do it. We, the American people, now we've done our job. We just simply voted. Voted is not voting enough.
Right. So the day after the election, my wife said, "Okay, you done with this?" I'm like, "Kara, it just started. The war just started, right?" And I got two. Before we're done here, I got two local questions for you, and I talked to you about this beforehand, right? Yeah. So now that the executive order or whatever came in from Trump, that Trend Largua is a terrorist organization, right? Just like Al Qaeda or whatever.
Yeah.
And we live in the communist state of Illinois behind Pritzker, and we have sanctuary state status, sanctuary cities, welcoming cities, all that crazy crap from the leftists. So say, like, I have a number of police reports that the Chicago police, when they arrested them, they knew they were Trend Largua based on their tattoos or emitting it and stuff like that, right? So now that they're designated as a terrorist organization, I'd like your opinion. Is it okay for these police officers to reach out to ICE, right, and say, listen, we just arrested Trend Largua. Their tattoos and everything state they're Trend Largua. Can they do this without having to worry about the state? The state should probably still come after them. But, I mean, legally, do they have the okay or green light based on federal law and based on these people being criminals, terrorists? Can they acknowledge to ICE?
Totally. They can do that if they want to do it. They can. And, and here's the thing, and it gets back to Boasberg, is the Secretary of State and President Trump have the authority with or without having Aragua declared a terrorist organization, to remove anybody from this country, to revoke visas, to deport them with or without that designation. They have the right. Same thing for this guy, in New York City. I forget his name.
Yeah.
They don't need any authorization other than the fact that it's discretionary, that the guy's on a visa or has a green card.
Green card, yeah.
And it's even a lower standard for people that are here on visas, that you can remove anybody at any time, in a discretionary basis, if they are not fulfilling the terms of being here peacefully and legally.
Good.
So it's legal. It's legal.
Yeah.
Stop complaining about it. Do something about it if you don't like it.
Yeah. So I have one last local question for you, because we're running out of time, and we talked about this, right? So now that Trump said you got to eradicate DEI and the federal funding and all this stuff, right? So we're in Pritzker's, his cousin's a transvestite and all this. He put a notebook banning bill. Some of the things we talked about before you jumped on here, right? So with us, like my kid's school, a teacher was arrested for having sex with the sophomore. Another teacher was arrested for making child porn of the kids and girls in the schools. We've got genderqueer, anal sex, all this crazy stuff going on in our school. What rights do we have based on what Trump's executive order is saying that we could withhold these funds? So can we approach our school board and say, listen, Trump executed this executive order. Either you get rid of this crap or you compromise the federal funds that are coming to the school. What are your thoughts?
I think that's quite legitimate, and that's what Trump's doing. He's cutting them off, from federal aid, and he has the right to do that. And there's another judge who in fact, Roberts himself and Coney Barrett, just approved spending money for all these perverted studies overseas, on whether men can menstruate, with whether, Hamas gets condoms, let's just study transgender in mice. And this is the Supreme Court that just said that money had to be paid over.
How is that? How is that possible that they can tell the executive branch that they cannot stop that spending from happening?
Well, they're using a construct that Agency for International Development was later legislated by Congress. But if there is a national security reason, or if there's fraud or whatever, the executive should be able to step in and at least pause. That's all Trump wanted to do, was to pause, to take a look at it, to have Congress take a look at it. And the Supreme Court said, no, it has to be paid over. But this is what you're dealing with. And
I'd like to do a study to see how many transgenders are Democrats compared to Republicans. That's a joke. That's a joke, Larry.
Yeah, I think that what's his name, Bruce Jenner, in his later life,
Republican.
He'll be a Republican one. He's not the one. No.
Caitlin's a Republican.
Brucey Jenner is the only one. Okay.
So do you have any closing statements? You could say your website again. I'm not say your website. Yeah, any closing statements?
What I'm saying is that you need a group like Freedom Watch, and my former group mostly does document requests. I do these hard-hitting cases in citizens' grand juries. What they do is important. What I do is important. But, I've been fighting the wars. I've been fighting a rear action, for 20 years with these forces, and they come after me too. And I need the help financially right now at Freedom Watch. And I hope that you'll join and get the book. It's not enough to read it. Join our Justice League, is we really need your help. They used to say in World War II, Uncle Sam needs you.
Yeah.
Freedom needs you. So I pray that people will go to freedomwatchusa.org and contribute, because we need the funds to hire more lawyers, more paralegals, pay for office space. And I would thank people for that.
Yeah. So we want to thank you for your dedication to helping us. There's not enough people like you out there. Unfortunately, a lot of the attorneys are leftists, and there's not enough people that are bold and have enough courage to do the things that you're doing and take the heat for half a century for us. So we appreciate it. Hopefully people will go to your website and contribute and get the word out. Paul.
Well, I can assure you I'm never going to retire. I'll be doing this to my grave, hopefully later than sooner.
Well, thank you for your time, Larry, and get that Jeffersonian message out there more. That's a good one to have.
I will. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk with you.
We're honored. Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, thank you, Larry.
Mutual.
Thanks.
But
Well, that was good. I mean, I always looked up to that guy back in the 90s and stuff.
I mean, he's doing
Larry. I shouldn't say that guy. Larry. I looked up to Larry.
he's doing good work. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
And it's hard to do what
DC
he's
needs
doing.
to get
These
cleaned up. That's
crazy
the problem.
leftists and these corrupt politicians on both sides. Unfortunately, guys like him have an uphill battle, and we got to support
I'm
them.
talking to people online who are arguing for sex books for kids. It's like, what are we talking about here?
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
It's
no, it's,
insane.
it's unbelievable. And fortunately, we have a good president now, but we need to back him up.
Oh, you're still here? I thought
Yeah.
you were done. Hey, that's okay.
I won't go away. I'm like,
Oh my God,
Are we?
you're like my planner's worth that I had from
Okay.
wrestling. I'm kidding, Larry. I'm joking.
can't get rid of me.
Well, no,
How
thank
much
you very
time
much.
do we
Yeah,
you-
we're just doing our closing
okay.
statements,
Yeah.
but our tech guy forgot to take you off the screen. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks.
you being on the show.
Thanks, guys.
Take
So
care.
you heard us complimenting you when we didn't think you were there.
I know it's a good thing you didn't say anything otherwise.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Larry.
All
Thank
right.
you so much for what
Okay.
you do.
Thanks, guys. God bless. Bye.
What do we got? Anything to wrap up? or-
No, I mean, this is, so listen, Paul's got an event next Thursday. Go ahead. It's your event.
SOS, Save Our Suburbs. Come next Thursday, Downers Grove American Legion, Post 80. We're going to talk. I mean, in the last week, we've seen that we had sex books for kids, heterosexual sex book for kids, 4 to 8.
Oh, but you're only against gay books.
Yeah, it's just I'm a gay basher, right? That's a 4 to 8 years old, graphic sexual scene in there. Then of course,
Wait, hold on a minute.
Downer South.
So you sent me that book, right? I told my wife, I'm like, Carrie, why don't you read this thing, man? We'll have a couple of drinks. And
Downer South has had its second pedo teacher / coach
Yep.
in like 3 years.
She was hot, by the way.
And so Terry wishes he was 15
Yeah,
year
I
old still.
told my son, he's a senior. I'm like, bring her over.
Up in Deerfield, we got boys changing in girls' bathrooms.
13-year-old
Pretty sure
girls.
13 years
for
old.
her, Terry.
And in Downers Grove,
December.
we have our
Wait, you
park
forgot
district.
December, the Downers Grove South track coach got arrested for
I
child
said
porn.
two.
Oh yeah,
Two.
child porn, taking pictures of girls doing stuff from our school. Thank you, Hank Peel.
Two.
Sorry, yeah.
It was a couple of years ago, but still
But he
two.
just got sentenced to 19 years on December.
He had child porn on his computer.
Yeah.
And then in our Downers Grove Park District has free speech zones. Laura Hoyce was in the Chicago Sun-Times. And none of our elected officials or candidates besides me are talking about any of these issues. So you know what? I decided to have a town hall. Everybody from around the area come around. We're going to network. We're going to talk about solutions. We're going to, try to build a coalition to save our suburbs because this is getting ridiculous. I mean, Downers Grove is on the map. In the Chicago Sun-Times, they got sex books. We've been putting out the word. They've been all over the place. We can't get anybody on the village council to say a damn thing about it.
One little plug for Paul about Save Our Suburbs. Chris Gilmartin, he's the radical leftist scumbag that's running as well. And he was being sarcastic about Paul's Save Our Suburbs, right? Paul's comment about his event next week about Save Our Suburbs isn't just necessarily about the crime-ridden, stuff that's going on in Chicago. There's some crime going on in Downers Grove, but it's not that bad, thank God. It's about Save Our Suburbs from our children being sexually abused, about our library being hijacked by radical leftists where they read gay books to 2-year-old babies. They have transvestites dancing with 12-year-old kids. We have our teachers molesting our kids in Downers Grove High School.
Santa
That's
event
what he
at the
meant. Save our
Methodist
suburbs
Church.
from radical leftist extremists.
Especially
HBO was
librarians.
so okay. You had Trans Santa. HBO is here to cover Trans Santa event
Trans Santa right here.
at the Downers Grove Methodist Church. Then the Downers Grove Library hires the Trans Santa person to be a social work intern
To children.
And
Then you got her beast fucking.
all right, stop.
That's my
stop.
fault. Well, she's full of tattoos. She looked like she just walked out of state.
I don't
prison.
care about that.
No,
I
but-
care about the fact that
Sorry,
this
sorry.
person would have
No, fuck
a
you
Trans
guys.
Santa event at the Methodist Church, and then the library thinks it's okay to hire that person as a social work intern. I don't think that's okay, and I don't care if anybody from the left is going to try to point out where I say something. I laugh at Terry's joke that he calls them beasts or whatever. I don't care. What I care about is the fact that they hired this person at the library after they tried to indoctrinate children with a transgender Santa Claus. I'm against that. I don't want my taxpayer dollars going to that, and I stand behind that statement. And you know what? The 200 safety incident reports shows that we probably should hire a security officer at the library. So there is a safety issue at the libraries. Anyway, there's all kinds of stuff going on in our suburbs right now. It's because we got a terrible governor. It's because we've got a terrible state Congress. It's because we have terrible politicians in Illinois. And the people have to start taking back their suburbs. And we can do it with candidates like myself. What do? Nothing unique, nothing crazy. Just stand up and start speaking against this stuff.
All right, so
come
I
out.
need to clarify something, right? When I say the word beast, I'm talking about a 6'4" some person with tattoos
You're not
up
making
and
it
down,
better.
up and down their arms. I will say that about a man, right? So we had this person going into Downers Grove North High School teaching kids about crazy stuff, right?
Yeah.
You got to look at my Facebook post and tell me if I'm wrong. It has nothing to do
Well, what
with
were
their,
they teaching
it has
the
nothing to
kids
do with
about?
their sexuality, right? I have friends that call beast and stuff. So this person is tattooed up, look like somebody I was with Joliet Prison, exactly like somebody I was with Joliet Prison, and that's what I meant. And go look at my Facebook thing.
Well, weren't they teaching the kids about something too?
Yes.
Wait, can you elaborate a little further on that? What about the kids that require a litter box in the class? Are they beasts or just
I don't.
kids?
Did that happen?
No, I don't think that happened. I think that was more in
happened.
Hinsdale and stuff.
I don't know.
Oh,
if that
okay, I
happened.
got the wrong.
Yeah, wrong school.
But the point is, come out next
Yeah.
Thursday. We'll have a networking event. Advocacy groups. Bring your material. You know, I'm giving everybody a chance to speak that wants to speak. So, and you know, we'll form a network. We'll form a coalition. We'll get everybody together. I know there are, you know, groups out
bring
there.
your favorite transvestite.
And hey,
Right?
Well,
we have
look
a peaceful dialogue.
Caston got shut down at his
Yeah,
event,
yeah.
so I wonder what'll happen to ours.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everybody.
Bye. Are we off?